Good morning. A huge welcome to our debate, Artificial Intelligence, Harnessing Technology to Superpower the Broker. I'm Victoria Hartley, Group Editor of Mortgage Solutions. I'll introduce our esteemed panelists very shortly. But before we start, I wanted to say how much of a pleasure it is to debate the outer edges of digital and AI technology in the mortgage market after so many years of coming shortly announcements or non-disclosure agreements. Now, our discussion today focuses on the here and now and on AI-driven chatbot technology already being used globally and in particular in the mortgage advice market. Now, both of our panelists are here to get into the detail of what that actually looks like, its far-reaching appeal, and what the difference it is, and the difference it makes to the broker firm actually using the technology every single day. Let me introduce our guests. We have Oliver Lennon, CEO at Syndeo, and Siobhan McAleer, MD, The Mortgage Shop. Now, as the debate progresses, please keep your questions coming in for our panelists. They're expecting them, and we've already had one or two which we can see in our offline chat box. So please don't be shy. We will definitely get to them, time allowing. We see it every day. The mobile phone is a central plank of people's lives. So the fact research that tells us mobile-based methods of communication like text or messaging are likely to be opened faster and get far more interest than email makes sense. Data from Pipestream suggests 78% of emails are never opened or responded to. I bet that sounds familiar. This makes life extremely hard for brokers trying to contact, communicate with, and educate their customers. But put that against the stat indicating 90% of messages sent through a messaging app, think WhatsApp, Facebook, or Messenger, are opened and responded to in the first 3 minutes of sending, with a 99% response rate after that. More of this later, but Oliver, big welcome today. And let's get into the science behind artificial intelligence in more detail. So what does Syndeo offer and what does the technology do?
Good morning, everyone. Vicky, thank you very much for the kind introduction. First of all, it's great to be here and it's great to see such numbers that we have on the masterclass this morning. Clearly, there is a high level of interest in this emerging technology around artificial intelligence and messaging channels. So hopefully today we'll give you a little bit more of insight into that. I guess in terms of, to answer your first question, Vicky, what does Syndeo do? We are, I guess, a communications company. Basically, our AI platform enables, in this instance, mortgage brokers, but we work across many industries to communicate with customers over some of the existing, but also some of the what we would call emerging digital channels. So from within a single platform, you can engage customer over, like you mentioned, the likes of Facebook, WhatsApp, web chat, SMS, and many more of these channels. I think at last count, there were something like 24 messaging channels used globally, and pick up some of the data on that later on. So we, while connecting to those channels, we use artificial intelligence as part of the platform. From a mortgage perspective, it'll help, the likes of you generate leads, qualify some of those leads, and automate some of the manual steps required to capture customer details relating, to the mortgage process. And again, and I will come on to this later, you cannot automate every step of every process. And if anyone tells you can, there's something, it's not true, obviously. But what we really focus is automating the simplistic and the key steps, but then blending that with real live engagement so you can connect your customers, to the most appropriate member of staff. And the AI will allow you to do that to assist them on their customer journey. So, Syndeo, what do? We are all about communication, and my own perspective, it's, it is fascinating how the medium which we use to communicate, whether that on a peer-to-peer basis or from a business customer communication, has changed in the last 20 years. You probably can tell by my looks, I've been in the industry for that and a longer period. When I first started working in this space, it was very much about, telephony and telephone communication. And, back then, 90+% of interactions that an organization would have with a customer was through the telephone. you know, that has changed, and it is continuing to change. You know, so you know that clearly was some time ago whenever voice dominated the industry. But what we see now is probably in some industries less than 50% of communications is over the voice channel. So these new channels are emerging and growing and changing day by day. So that's really what Syndeo was about, is opening up those channels, Vicky, and letting organizations such as people in the audience we have here today access those to help drive their business.
Thanks, Oliver. So, but why does messaging via mobile phones work when email messaging can be really disappointing? It'd be really interesting to understand what's happening there.
Yeah, I mean, email as a communication has been around for a long time. And indeed, SMS, actually, I think this is the 25th anniversary of SMS. So some of these channels have been around for a long time. You know, not just the telephone, the telephony channel. But I guess the simple answer to that question is convenience. You know, one of the taglines we have in our business here is, you know, it's be where they are, be where your customers are. So if your customers are using these apps day and daily as they are, and that's what the data tells us, then I guess you need to be there too. And if you're not there, you can be sure if your competitors are not there, they're starting to think about that. And that's certainly what we're seeing now. We operate throughout the UK and Ireland, but we also operate with a number of global customers, and certainly the trends that we are seeing more and more as these organizations coming in and taking advantage of these channels. So it certainly is about convenience. You know, messaging is not only the first inclination for most people when they want to communicate as we do with family and friends. We're used to, you know, being in WhatsApp groups and pinging SMSs or messenger chats to each other. Some of the younger demographic are into Snap, etc., etc. But more and more we are seeing it, and less so, I suppose, at the moment in the UK and Ireland, but it is coming. But certainly in other parts of the world, there's much more desire to communicate using the likes of WhatsApp, WeChat in the Far East. And I guess we can see why that is. You know, sometimes making a voice call, sending an email, filling in a form, you know, it's not the most convenient way to connect with a business in this digital age. And so if you look at the stats that are in the industry, you know, 98% of 25 to 34-year-olds already use a smartphone. That's in the UK. So that's pretty much 100% coverage. You know, on average, I think the data is saying, you know, 58 times a day, they have those phones in their hand. Looking at my kids, I think it's actually probably a lot more than that, but the data is saying on average. And again, over 50% of those are outside normal business hours. So you start to think about, you know, back to that be where they are. So if they're on these phones, if they're on these apps, and if they're outside business hours, that's where you as a business need to start to think about going. I think, you know, about 5 years ago, something like, you know, almost 75 to 80% of smartphone users were making more than one call a week. You know, today, actually using a smartphone to make a call isn't even in the top 20 reasons that people have a phone, believe it or not. You know, it's the top one, as you might guess, is messaging. Again, there are something like 6 billion, 8 billion people on the planet. So almost, you know, 75% of the people globally are using these messaging apps day and daily with something like 1.6 billion. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, if I may, just wondering, another piece of data which sprang out at me, it suggests 62% of messaging apps maintain high re-engagement rates after 12 months. 12 months after customers first use them. So, you know, it's about customers staying with those conversations. Is there any explanation for that as well?
Yeah, I guess it's the immediacy of it. And that happens on a number of fronts. If I shared you my screen of my phone, and if I look at it now, I think I have 380 unread emails appearing on that little icon on my phone. I have zero. I have nothing for WhatsApp or Messenger. And again, it's because we're in these apps day and daily on a consumer basis. Then if a business reach out to you in those apps, you're more likely to read. Yes, we use email, and it's but we don't use it as regularly as we would some of these apps. And I guess email has been bedeviled by the spam issue. There is no doubt about that. And I think that's one of the challenges the industry will face in any form of communication. You can see it over the telephony. We're probably all used to our home phones being spammed with various calls, and the same ultimately will happen. But I know the platforms are putting a lot of safeguards in place to try and prevent that for the likes of WhatsApp and Facebook, etc. But it ultimately comes back to convenience, Vicky.
Okay, and Oliver, if I can ask as well, lots of the people attending
Sure.
the masterclass, they might not be particularly familiar with what exactly conversational AI is. So can you tell me a little bit about how it works, where they start if they want to harness it?
Yeah, I mean, and I guess the tech industry maybe is to blame for this. We use lots of terms and we make things often sound quite complicated that are not necessarily that complicated. So, AI or conversational AI, we've used terms like AI, chatbots, machine learning, automation, etc. In many regards, they distill down into a similar thing. In this context, simply put, conversational AI is a software program that can carry on a conversation with a real person. Now, it uses that famous word algorithms, which we're all used to in maybe the last 12 months with school results at A levels, but it effectively uses a set of underlying algorithms to try and understand what a user is either saying or entering. And the key to it is really training that with good quality training data. Bottom line is the better the training data, the better the algorithm will work. As I said at the outset, it's not. It's by no means is it absolute perfection. From a human to human interaction, if you think about it, very often we will misunderstand another human. We will ask them to repeat what they said because we didn't quite hear it for some reason or we didn't understand the context of it. So in some regards, the expectation that people will have that conversational AI is perfection, that it understands everything from the get-go, is a false expectation. And again, I think the industry has peddled that a little bit to our own detriment. But there is no doubt the technology, and I said I've been in this field for close to 20 years now, the technology has evolved and changed. But I think there are three things I would say, and rather than focusing on the algorithms or how the technology works under the hood, so to speak, to me, there's three key things that a business needs to focus or concentrate on. Number one, and this is all about, to me, the end-to-end process. So it's about how do you personalize that experience for your customers, and that's very much based on understanding how they engage, the terminology and language that they use. So engaging with that language as opposed to the terminology that you might use internally. For example, if you have a very open question in terms of the engagement, how can I help you today? That will elicit a whole range of responses. Whereas if you tailor the ask, so to speak, in a more structured or more directed way, so something like, hi, I'm Amy, your intelligent assistant. I can help you arrange a mortgage appointment or help you with some queries you might have about a mortgage. That directs the user down a certain path, and the chances are you're going to have a much higher success rate. So that's firstly. Secondly, as I said a little while ago, it's around automation. So automate the simple steps and don't try to automate everything. Like if we give you a really simple example of automation that works well, that we're all very familiar with, it's the ATM or the cash machine. Now that's brilliant because it's extremely intuitive. It does exactly what it says on the tin. It's reliable. And as a user, the user experience is very straightforward and very simple to follow. So we would always try to mimic that. Keep it simple, keep it intuitive. I would far rather use an ATM, as I'm sure most of the audience would, as opposed to standing in a bank queue for, if I could now, as most branches are closing, but standing in a bank queue for 40 minutes or 50 minutes to try and withdraw some cash. And I can use the ATM to my convenience. So think about it in that sense, but what you want to automate and make it as simple. And thirdly, then I guess it's around that end-to-end process. As I said, you can't automate every step, but if you think about the customer journey, pick out those aspects. So from a mortgage broker perspective, and Siobhan will cover a little bit of this later on, but if it's a qualification bit, it's about the capture customer information. Then when you need to help them, it's about blending or connecting those customers with real people, with members of staff in your office to help them through that process. Obviously, a mortgage process is relatively elongated over a period of weeks and months. So you need to think about the things you want to automate, but then we have a concept called blended AI. So it's about blending that automation with the human interaction, Vicky. So I think that's key in terms of getting the most out of the technology as well.
This is really interesting, and as you say, we'll get into the practical application very shortly. But how is this technology likely to actually evolve over the next 5 to 10 years? What kind of things will people be seeing?
I guess it'll evolve in a number of ways. For sure, it's changing. It's not going to replace humans. All this talk about AI, and despite what the sci-fi buffs might lead you to believe, we're not going to get in now. In different industry, it'll evolve in different ways. But I think what you'll see in industries such as the mortgage, or people who have largely lived in a physical world, you see a mixture. I have this term called phygital, which is blending digital and physical presence. I think you'll see much more of that. And if you think about it, you see the reverse happening. So if I look at Google or Amazon, we all see those as purely online digital companies. But 18 months ago, Amazon launched in the West Coast of the States, Amazon Go, which are their high street stores. Now they've blended their technology into those stores. So they're taking the best out of the technology, but have a physical presence. And similarly, Google later this summer are launching high street stores in New York. And so again, you see what we would have classified as purely digital companies coming into the physical world. I think the reverse also needs to be applied, in the sense that if you're in a physical or largely a physical world with high street stores or branches, you need to start to think, how can you actually blend the digital aspect of it? I think what you'll also see coming along or coming down track is much more. So if I look what's happening in the Far East in China, which is usually a bit of a weather vane for some of this technology, there's a platform called WeChat, and WeChat in China dominates the mobile phone market, in the sense that everything a consumer does in terms of with each other or with businesses is delivered through WeChat. WeChat is similar to WhatsApp. So I think you'll see these platforms becoming much more the overall system within which people operate. So if I want to order my pizza, get my dog groomed, get my mortgage appointment, etc., I will do it from within an app or a messaging type app such as WeChat, WhatsApp, or whatever comes next. And I think then you'll also then see the adoption of more of the smartphone technology. So, voice biometrics, facial recognition into those apps. So, if you think about it, if I'm applying for a mortgage, if I can use facial recognition within my camera to identify who I am, if that's connected to a back end, if it can then automatically give me an update of where I'm at in the mortgage process, if it's a decision in principle has been reached for my mortgage, if it could then ping me and ask me to upload my last 3 pay slips, if it could then ping the mortgage broker and tell them I've completed that step, and then maybe offer me the option to have a video call or a direct chat with that mortgage advisor. So I think you'll see it starting to be wrapped up into much more of the overall end-to-end process, taking advantage of the technology within the device, as well as the connectivity within the back-end system, Vicky.
Oliver, thanks so much for that quick flash forward. Now, I'm afraid we're going to have to go to the poll and move things along. Time is already ticking away. We've got so much to cover, but it's all exciting stuff. Okay, if our lovely assistant Mark could help us out here, we'd like to bring the poll in, get that up on screen, please. We'd love to hear your views. Everybody who's watching today, please start to vote now in the poll. I'm hoping it's going to flash up very, very shortly. The question is on the poll, are you considering using AI and messaging technology within your own business? Answer is A, not considering; B, will consider in 12 months or later, considering within the next 12 months, currently implementing, or a solution already in place. So please do get voting. You don't have to make your decision right now, but you've got about another 15, 20 minutes before we come to the results. So we'd obviously love to share those with you at the end of the session today. So now it's time to bring in our mortgage advice specialist. Siobhan McAleer is an entrepreneurial business leader and strategist. She opened her first mortgage shop in 1992 And the business went on to become one of Northern Ireland's largest and most instantly recognisable brands, with currently 21 branches and 45 advisors. Now, Siobhan currently sits on the board of Revolution UK, an end-to-end point-of-sale system owned by Stonebridge Mortgage Solutions and is widely used by over 400 brokers. A huge welcome, Siobhan. Good to have you with us today.
Thanks, Vicky.
Now, can I ask, why did you decide to put the Syndeo cloud messaging system, or effectively chatbot, on your website?
Well, Vicky, like all brokers, we aim to make the customer journey as straightforward as possible. I mean, that's our USP as a broker. That's what we want to get to. But at the same time, we need to encourage the behaviours that increase engagement with the customer. And and when we align that engagement to establish what is important to the customer, it's really only then that we can build a relationship with them. So I suppose that's where the artificial intelligence and chatbot comes in. It focuses in on what's important to the customer and what their priorities are. It's a refinement tool, and the more refined our needs are, the more product the mortgage shop will sell.
And why did you decide to make the move during the pandemic, which was a time when many people kind of drew in their horns a little bit, but you went for it?
Well, amidst all the many shocks that came with the pandemic, the shock to our personal communication as a business was a real biggie for us. Our success has always been around face-to-face, word of mouth. All the things that were stymied by the pandemic were the things that were key to our success. So, digital adaptations had to happen. Our success may well be around the quality of our people, and we have the best people in the industry, in my view. But you still had to be aware and awake to the opportunities. We desperately needed to increase our footprint. We needed to create, virtual opportunities. But at the same time, those opportunities needed to be embedded with our existing structures. And I suppose what chatbot has done is that it has allowed us to do what we do best and help us deal with some of the challenges that came along with no face-to-face communications.
It's interesting that the digital technology allowed you to put your people front and centre as well, which obviously allays some of the fears. People always think it might slightly sideline. But so how did you find Syndeo, Siobhan? Were they a company you'd heard of before? What was the process?
Yeah, I mean, Northern Ireland's not a big place, and I was aware of them, and we have found them professional and responsive, and they immediately saw the benefit of including our people in writing script and writing the answers. So they got off to a good start when they did that. Because we had that engagement. So. But with any adaptation, you plan, you act, and then you review. And that phrase, follow the data, I think we all hear it far too much these days. But we followed the data, and really, the harsh reality is that some adaptations can be maladaptive initially, and we did have concerns about the level of traffic initially. But we contacted Syndeo, and their responsiveness could not have been better. They came up with the idea of putting the icon on every page, on adding some words to the icon. So they did a really, really good job at reacting to what we needed. They know the quality improvement is determined by the end user, and that's always the sign of a good supplier.
So how did you weigh up the return on investment when it came to making this move, Siobhan?
Well, I suppose it's a fixed cost, so it's not hard to work out value for money. So depending where you are in the country, it could be one mortgage, half a mortgage, two mortgages, or whatever. But that's not really how I saw it. I mean, to me, what you're buying is you're buying an extra layer of engagement. And that extra layer of engagement translates into commitment, and commitment translates into business, for us. So to me, if you want to weigh up the value in pounds, you can do, but to me, it is all about the engagement.
Lovely. And what key decisions did you need to make during the implementation process? Because I imagine it was pretty intense. And did you have to optimize or change your website in any way first to actually accommodate the technology?
Well, we were in a good position actually, because we were building a new website at the time. So that sort of made it easier. I suppose the big decision for us was around I suppose the first impressions, the start of the customer journey, capturing the data, at the beginning. So, once we established that's where we wanted to focus on, capturing and addressing, the client's ideas, their needs, their expectations. And, first impressions has never gone out of date. It's always going to be a thing. And what I liked about chatbot, I think I'm quite myself. I'm fairly straight to the point. And, it's a bit of that Occam's razor thing. Why do a conversation when a sentence will do? And chatbot is a bit like that. You have mixed reviews on that style of management, but I like that directness, and I like that cut to the chase. There was an ease with which the chatbot system collated the information, and what can end up as being a complex journey, they sort of break it into digestible bites that the customer can deal with, and we as advisors can manage.
Okay, and how has the chatbot improved the quality of leads themselves that have actually been fed into advisors' day-to-day business practices?
Okay, well, it wasn't that many years ago when we actually couldn't get our advisors to take on web leads. They were the poor relations. They were generally, viewed as being fairly crap relative to leads that came through the phone or through the door or through referrals. For every 20 you had to sort of plough your way through to find one half good one that may or may not have gone to business. So a lot of tire kickers. But that has completely changed. They're now seen as gold dust. They're much more refined. The information's accurate. The engagement is much, much more meaningful. So chatbot sort of sets the scene. It starts us on the client process. It's a virtual introduction, and I suppose with the use, when you've got really good people, it becomes virtual rapport, and then eventually that virtual rapport becomes a virtual relationship, and that's how we make our money.
Makes complete sense. Thanks very much, Siobhan. Now, obviously, investing in your business is always a serious move, with advisors constantly looking for a tangible return. So you've already touched on this to an extent, but what advice can you offer about how investing in technology will actually help to grow any advisor's business?
Well, I can only really talk about my own, but the Mortgage Shop brand is my baby, and I've always been into high visibility in the traditional ways with advertising and promotion, and I do believe the brand under which you operate it must be able to compete with the brands you intermediate with. So, you know, your brand as a broker, you must be as good in your view as that of Lloyd's Banking Group or Santander or whatever, no matter how crazy that may sound. But investment in the virtual world is just a continuation of the promotion of that brand. You know, if we want to keep our customers for the duration of the mortgage, we can't roll over and let our lender partners just take the business away from us. You know, you've got that, and then you've got our first-time buyers who just live in a virtual world. They're nearly born into a virtual world. So in terms of investment, I'm not sure anybody really has a choice about investing in the technology and the virtual world if they want to stay alive. I mean, our business has grown 40% over the last 3 years. Now, I would say a large part of that would be around the technology piece. You know, in times of plenty, technology allows you to maximize your business, but in lean times, it also allows you to look after your clients and continue to make money. So at whatever curve you're in terms of how good business is, technology is key to keeping it going. So, you know, do we have a choice? No. Do you have to go at it aggressively? Yes.
Lovely, thanks, Siobhan. And actually, we've got an absolute mountain of questions coming in. So what I'm going to do is go quickly to Oliver, and then we'll come to audience questions straight after that. So, Oliver, if I can bring you back in, how's the pandemic hastened the need for this sort of software, and how many brokers do you think, or do you know, are already using it and will be in the near future?
A simple answer, yes. I think the pandemic has accelerated this. You know, in the tech world, we've been used to this industry, this technology, and even the sort of technology we're using right at this moment in time. We're all now very familiar with the Zoom. I think, albeit we're not on the Zoom call, but it's a similar principle. Whereas 18 months ago, I think outside of the tech industry, nobody had heard of Zoom. So we're very much as consumers familiar with that, and I think the pandemic, you know, to the detriment, as we know, of some high street stores and brands from brick and retail, has, you know, accelerated the digital engagement. And it's not only the preserve of the 20-somethings, it is, you know, all generations now, right up to what they call the silver surfers, that are now very familiar with this technology out of necessity rather than perhaps desire. So I think that has certainly accelerated quite a lot, Vicky.
Okay, thanks very much for that, Oliver. Now, I think it's time for audience questions. So I think this one, the first one we've got is from Nigel White, who is from Clear Thinking Finance. And Nigel, thanks very much for your question. I think this one's to Oliver first. One of the challenges is keeping a compliance-proof audit trail when communicating with clients via something like WhatsApp. How is this addressed? So Oliver, if you could touch on that first, please.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, data and data protection and privacy and data security is top of most people's minds. So everything that goes through a channel such as WhatsApp, we securely store it within our own back end, which is running on Amazon Web Services, which is one of the most secure infrastructures you can run globally. We can run that across different data centers. So all of that data in terms of the communication that's between the customer and the business is held, you know, within that secure data store. So from an audit, a compliance perspective, you have access or visibility to that at any time. Obviously, GDPR rules kick in terms of how you access that and cleanse that data. You know, we look after that very much as well. Sorry, go ahead. I was going to add that the one thing that particularly I know Nigel mentioned WhatsApp. Again, just to explain maybe for the audience, there are different flavors of WhatsApp. So there is the WhatsApp that we as consumers are all very familiar with. The WhatsApp version that we are talking about here is what's called the Business API. And that is basically a hardened version of WhatsApp that allows us to programmatically access it. So in many regards, everything that comes into WhatsApp comes into your business WhatsApp as one published number or channel, and then multiple people within your organization kind of get access to that through our application. So you don't need to have each individual having their own WhatsApp, or the customer messaging individual members of your staff on WhatsApp. It all comes into a central, think of it as a central inbox that then you have complete access to, regardless of which broker or which member of staff is dealing with which customer, and you can see all of that and slice and dice it any way you want as well.
Lovely. If I can bring Siobhan in, obviously you've experienced this. So how have you found the audit trail that's coming from off the web chat service?
Yeah, I suppose it's, our thing is that some of the needs that come in, it can take quite a while for them actually come to fruition. So it's actually a bit of a job to sort of monitor all of them right the way through. We know ones that have moved forward quickly, and that information we can get when we ask for it. So I think the audit thing is something we maybe need to work a little bit harder on, in terms of, ensuring that we are getting what we should do out of it. But all our initial findings are that it's working very well for us.
Super, thanks, Siobhan. And I'll move on to a question from Matt Lowndes. Hello, Matt, at MAB. He's asking today, do you envisage having access to sourcing mortgage products within the communications with the customer? So is that an add-on? I guess this is a question to Oliver.
I'm not sure I entirely understand, but if the question is around
I think
delivering the end-to-end mortgage product over the service,
yes,
I would say technically
a mortgage calculator or a product display perhaps being offered by the chatbot in some way. I'm guessing that's where Matt's going.
Yes, again, that's entirely possible within the channel, or within any of these channels. But I think it is about trying to blend what I said earlier, the overall process is Siobhan knows well, mortgage processing or application can take, weeks and months. So it's about trying to identify the key steps. And if it means, yes, pushing out over this channel different mortgage products to allow the customer to choose between those products, yeah, all of those things are entirely possible, yes. But I wouldn't, if it's about automating every aspect of the mortgage process at this point in time, I would say no, that's not what you should be trying to do, because you just need to blend that interaction with the advisor at any point along that process. Automate what the consumer, so you need to think about what the customer wants. And I think Siobhan referenced that earlier. It's put yourself in the shoes of the customer, and think it from that perspective. If it's easier for them to access the part of the process using this channel, absolutely do. If it's make it more difficult for them, then you need to think why. It might be saving you back office time for sure, but you need to think of it primarily from the perspective of the customer.
Okay, thanks very much for that, Oliver. And I've got another question. Is the technology completely under the control of the broker? There's no chance the AI will go off script. I mean, we're not imagining a rogue piece of technology here, but let's get into the detail of that a bit, Oliver.
No, there's no chance of the AI going rogue. There was a famous, about 2 or 3 years ago, Microsoft launched to the World Wide Web an AI chatbot called Tay, which was based on self-learning, and very quickly, within a matter of days, I guess online community had turned it into a homophobic, racist, foul language application. But that's not how our application is built in any way. So at every point of the journey, you as a customer, you as the end user, have access to looking at what's going on. At any point, actually, a member of staff can actually step in and take over control from the AI. If for whatever reason it may be that the customer isn't responding and you want to then take over control of that, you can do that. We're constantly looking at adding training data. So as I mentioned at the outset, the more data you have around this, the better it will understand the queries. But it's trained in a very defined and very narrow way in this instance around mortgage processing. So that's what it understands. And no, we don't have self-learning turned on in this instance. Therefore, there's no chance of it going rogue.
Okay, thank you, Oliver. Let's just settle that right here and right now. We've got another question from Michael Roberts, True Cost Mortgages. He's asking, is it possible, this sounds a bit, well, I'll ask and we'll see where we get to. Is it possible to create a WhatsApp group, My Mortgage Broker, but keep all the messages private for each client? So I'm guessing he's talking about messaging, which somehow subdivides and keeps obviously all the data completely intact and behind closed doors for each client. Is that, what would you say, Oliver?
Yeah, so in essence, or essentially, that's what we provide. As I mentioned earlier, it's the WhatsApp for business is different than the consumer version of it. So your staff don't have don't have WhatsApp accounts. You can have multiple WhatsApp accounts for business for your organization, if you will. But every message that comes into that business goes into like call it a group, I think was the term you mentioned, Vicky. And from within that group chat, you can see every message that has come in. But whenever you message back using our application, that goes directly back to the individual as opposed to all customers who have come in. So really what we're doing at a platform level is aggregating all those messages so you see them in one place. But when you're communicating from the platform, you're going back to the individual customer who messaged you in the first instance. Hopefully that makes sense and answers the question.
It does. I wonder, is there any way of keeping messages private between a single broker and their client as opposed to having a large inbox which everybody can view?
Yeah, we can do that as well. I mean, ultimately, I'll not spend too much time, but more than happy to talk anyone through this in a lot more detail in terms of the platform and the technology. But yes, you can have inboxes, you can have what we would call queues, which shows all messages, and you can have individual advisors have only access to certain queues or certain inboxes, and you can set up all sorts of rules and what we would call them routing, so the messages only get sent to a certain group of people, perhaps with a certain skill set. So yeah, there's a lot of that, but probably too much to bore many of the audience here, but more than happy to have offline conversations with anyone after this and show them a little bit more detail around it.
It's lovely. Thanks very much, Oliver. Super. Well, it's time to announce our poll results now. So Mark, if you could flash those up onto the screen, I'd be so grateful. And hopefully my technology is going to show that to me at my end. It's not, but I think, no, I can't see the screen. Let's see if I can find a way. Where are we? Okay, so here we are. I can see them. I hope you can too. Let's have a look. So the question was, again, who as a business is actually considering AI in the next 12 months? And we have the largest section by far is considering within the next 12 months. Where are we? When we come down to the red group, we'll consider in 12 months or less, and blue not considering at the moment, 20%. Interesting. So obviously it looks like, Oliver, lots of people are going to be watching with interest today, looking at the implementation process.
Yeah, I mean, those results, Vicky, are similar to what we're seeing across other sectors. There is, I think you mentioned at the very outset, there's a lot of hype, there's a lot of interest, there's a lot of discussion in this type of technology, and it is only really starting, in my perspective, it is only starting at the early stages of the technology evolution. So in larger organizations, what we've seen a lot of trials, proof of concept. So I said some of those larger corporates we're dealing with are still at the stage of proof of concept and running beyond, but some of the smaller organizations throughout the UK and Ireland, like Siobhan's organization, are adopting it for very specific and focused needs. So the results don't surprise me that a lot of people are interested, and I suppose the audience we have here today is a testament to that too.
Absolutely. And just to say as well, there are some questions we haven't got to today, so huge apologies, but our panelists will come back to you after the event today and follow those up. So it just remains for me to wrap things up very quickly and to say a huge thank you to everyone watching. Look out for the feedback link tomorrow morning as well. We're keen to hear your views on the event today. And the email will also offer a link to watch the event again, or for you to forward on to colleagues or other industry members you think would find the event valuable. So it's just a sign off from me today. And again, a huge thank you to Oliver and Siobhan for participating today. We'll look forward to seeing you another time. Thank you and all the best, everybody.